secretary chased by criminals, but stray dog appears to save her. Jessica Miller felt her heart racing as she hurried through the streets of downtown Denver. She had discovered something she shouldn't have and was now certain she was being followed. The documents in her bag seemed to grow heavier with every step. That's when she heard quick footsteps behind her. Two hooded men were approaching fast, and she recognized their voices as they began shouting her name. It was Tyler, the son of the owner of the company where she worked, and Richard, the accountant. But why were they hiding their faces? "Jessica, wait up! We need to talk!" Tyler shouted, but his tone didn't sound friendly at all. She quickened her pace, turning down a side street. Her 5 years as a secretary at Williams Construction had never prepared her for something like this. It all started the week before when she had to organize some old files and found documents that didn't make sense. "You don't understand the situation," Richard yelled. "You need to give us those papers back." Jessica ran faster, but she barely knew this part of town. She hadn't worked there long, having moved from Omaha for a better life. Her parents, Margaret and Anthony, had always taught her to be honest at work, and that was exactly what had gotten her into this mess. When she realized the numbers in the reports didn't match the contracts, she couldn't stay silent. She made copies of everything and went to talk to her direct supervisor, Manager Brian, but he seemed very nervous and said he'd handle it. The next day, she noticed her computer had been tampered with. "Jessica, stop this nonsense." Tyler was closer now. "You don't know what you're doing." She turned a corner and found herself in a dead-end alley. Her heart nearly leaped out of her chest. The tall walls of the office buildings surrounded her, and the only things at the end of the alley were a trash can and some debris. The two men appeared at the entrance, panting. "Finally," Richard said, pulling off his hood to reveal his sweaty face. "Jessica, you need to listen to us." "Why are you chasing me like this?" she asked, pressing against the cold wall. "And why were you hiding your faces?" Tyler also removed his hood, showing a desperate expression she had never seen on the 28-year-old she'd known for years. "Because things are really complicated," he replied. "Those documents you took, they could destroy the whole company. So what? If something's wrong, it should come to light." Jessica clutched her bag tightly to her chest. "You don't understand." Richard stepped closer. "These aren't just minor irregularities. If this gets out, 300 families will lose their jobs. All the employees will be left with nothing." Suddenly, a fierce bark echoed through the alley. A medium-sized golden dog appeared, growling between her and the two men. The dog had light caramel fur, floppy ears, and very intelligent dark eyes. Jessica recognized him immediately. "Rusty!" she exclaimed in surprise. It was the same dog she fed every day at the office entrance. She always left him scraps from her lunch, and he waited for her every morning. But she never imagined he'd show up here at this exact moment. The dog stood firmly between Jessica and the two men, baring his teeth with a low, threatening growl. Tyler and Richard took a few steps back, clearly intimidated. "Where did that dog come from?" Richard asked nervously. "He follows me sometimes," Jessica replied, feeling an odd sense of protection. "But I never thought he'd—" "Jessica, you need to listen to us calmly." Tyler tried to sound more composed. "Let's talk this out like adults. Make the dog leave." But Rusty didn't move. He stayed right there, steady, muscles tense and ready to attack if needed. Jessica noticed he was limping slightly on his right hind leg, but it didn't lessen his determination to protect her. "I don't tell him what to do," she said, "but you can talk. Just don't try to get closer." Richard took a deep breath and ran a hand through his graying hair. At 45, he had always been a respected accountant, but now he looked like a desperate man. "Jessica, those documents you found, they show the company has been using a scheme to win bids. It's nothing violent, but it's irregular." "What kind of scheme?" she asked, though she already had her suspicions. "Insider information," Tyler admitted. "My father gets tips from friends at City Hall about upcoming projects. Then we prepare proposals that always win." Jessica felt her stomach twist. She'd always known George Williams, the owner of Williams Construction, had political connections, but she never imagined it was something like this. "That's corruption," she said quietly. "It's survival," Richard countered. Do you think a small construction company like ours could compete with the big players without this? Everyone does the same thing. But not everyone gets caught, Tyler added. And if these documents leak, there'll be nothing left. Not for us, not for the employees, not for the families who depend on the company. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Rusty remained still, but Jessica noticed he was paying attention to the conversation. It was as if he understood this was important. The dog had something different in his eyes, an intelligence beyond the ordinary. How many people work for the company? She asked. 287 direct employees, Richard answered promptly. With their families, that's nearly 1,000 people who rely on Williams Construction to survive. Jessica thought of Deborah from cleaning, who supported 3 grandchildren, of Manny in the warehouse, who was close to retirement, of Amber at the front desk, who'd just had a baby. All those people would really lose their jobs if the company shut down. But that doesn't make what you're doing right, she said, confused. Of course not, Tyler agreed, but it also doesn't make it right to leave all those families out on the street over something that's become normal in the industry. Normal doesn't mean correct, Jessica insisted. Richard took a step closer, but Rusty growled again, making him stop. Jessica, you're young, just 26. You still see the world in an idealistic way. But reality is complicated. Sometimes we have to choose between what's absolutely right and what's practically right. My age has nothing to do with it, she snapped. My parents raised me to be honest, no matter how old I am. Tyler sighed and leaned against the alley wall. Look, Jessica, I'll be straight with you. My father doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out you have those documents, he'll take drastic measures. What kind of measures? She asked, a chill running through her. He has powerful lawyers. They could pin anything on you. Theft, sabotage, anything that sticks and lands you in jail. Jessica's legs felt weak. She'd never done anything wrong in her life. The thought of being falsely accused terrified her. That's blackmail, she murmured. It's reality, Richard said. George Williams didn't get where he is by playing nice. He protects his business at all costs. Rusty seemed to sense Jessica's rising tension and pressed closer, his warm body against her leg. The contact steadied her a little. What if I give the documents back? She asked. What happens to me? Nothing, Tyler said quickly. Everything goes back to normal. You keep working, even get a promotion. My father always valued loyal employees. But the scheme continues? For now, Richard admitted, until we find a way to transition to a more transparent model. Jessica laughed humorlessly. Transition? How many years have you been doing this? About 15, Tyler said quietly. 15 years, she exclaimed. And you think you'll stop now? Things are changing, Richard argued. The government is cracking down. Eventually, we'll have to adapt. Eventually? Jessica shook her head. You'll keep going until you get caught, and then all the families will suffer. Rusty began to growl softly, staring toward the alley entrance. Jessica followed his gaze and saw a third man approaching. It was Brian, her direct supervisor. Oh no, Tyler muttered. He shouldn't be here. Brian stepped into the alley with a grim expression. At 35, he had always been a fair boss to Jessica, but now he seemed like a completely different person. Jessica, what a disappointment, he said, shaking his head. I tried to handle this amicably, but you didn't make it easy. Handle what? She asked. Brian, did you know about all this? Of course I knew. I've been a manager for 10 years. Do you think I got this far by being naive? The revelation hit her like a punch to the gut. Brian had always been like an older brother to her. He'd taught her everything about the job, defended her when other employees tried to dump extra tasks on her, always treated her with respect. You're involved too, she said, more a statement than a question. I am, he admitted, and you should be too. It's part of professional growth. Professional growth? Jessica nearly shouted. This is corruption. Rusty growled louder at Brian, who seemed genuinely intimidated by the dog. Jessica, you need to understand, Brian continued, keeping his distance. I started just like you, found out about the scheme, was outraged, wanted to report it, but then they showed me the numbers. How many families depend on this? How many jobs would be lost? And you accepted it? I grew up, he said, stopped seeing the world in black and white and started seeing shades of grey. Shades of grey, she repeated bitterly. What a pretty way to say you sold out your principles. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Jessica, enough drama. What do you want? Money? A better position? Spit it out. I want you to stop this, she said firmly. I want you to find an honest way to keep the company running. It's not possible, Richard said. The market won't allow it. Then maybe the company shouldn't exist, she replied. The three men looked at her as if she'd said something blasphemous. 287 families, Jessica, Brian said slowly. 287. She closed her eyes for a moment. Rusty nudged her hand with his head, as if trying to reassure her. There has to be another way, she murmured. There isn't, Tyler said. This is the reality. Either you accept being part of the solution, or you become part of the problem. What solution? Keep stealing? Keep surviving, Richard corrected, and letting others survive too. Jessica opened her eyes and looked at each of the three men. They all seemed sincere in their twisted way of seeing things. They truly believed they were doing the right thing. And if I don't agree? She asked. Then you'll have to deal with my father, Tyler said darkly, and he won't be as understanding as we are. Is that a threat? It's a warning, Brian answered. Jessica, I like you. Always have. That's why I'm here trying to resolve this peacefully. Rusty suddenly lifted his head and stared intently at something behind the men. Jessica followed his gaze and saw an elderly woman approaching the alley entrance. The woman, who must have been around 70, wore a simple dress and carried a shopping bag. Her grey hair was tied in a bun, and she had a steady gaze behind her glasses. Rusty, she called. Where have you been, boy? The dog wagged his tail vigorously, but stayed by Jessica's side. Do you know this dog? Tyler asked, surprised. I do, she replied, stepping into the alley without showing fear. He's mine, or was, until he decided to become half the neighborhood's guardian angel. The woman took in the scene before her and quickly understood the situation. Are you bothering this young lady? She asked, with an authority that didn't match her fragile appearance. Ma'am, this isn't your business, Richard said, though without much conviction. Anything involving my Rusty is my business, she retorted. And the way he's protecting the girl tells me you must be up to no good. Jessica felt a strange sense of relief. There was something about the woman's presence that made her feel safer. What's your name, dear? The older woman asked. Jessica Miller, ma'am. Pleasure, Jessica. I'm Barbara Wilson. And these gentlemen here are employees from the company I work for, Jessica replied, not naming them. Mrs. Wilson nodded and studied each of the three men carefully. I see. And what do they want from you? Some documents I stumbled upon. Important documents. Very, Jessica admitted. Ma'am, please. Tyler tried to intervene. This is a private matter. Private is what happens at home, Mrs. Wilson countered. Out here on the street with my dog involved, it becomes my business. Brian stepped closer. Mrs. Wilson, is it? Look, maybe you don't understand how complicated this situation is. Young man, I'm 72. I've seen more complexity than you can imagine. Richard tried a different approach. Mum, we just want to talk to Jessica peacefully. Nothing serious is happening here. If it's nothing serious, why is my Rusty standing guard like this? And she asked. He only does that when he senses real danger. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now back to it. Jessica looked at Rusty with renewed admiration. The dog truly seemed to understand complex situations in an almost human way. Mrs. Wilson, she said, they're trying to convince me to hide evidence of wrongdoing at the company I work for. Wrongdoing? The woman repeated, intrigued. What kind? Schemes to win contracts, Jessica explained. Insider information, that sort of thing. Mrs. Wilson nodded slowly. I see, and you think that's right? She asked the three men. It's complicated, Tyler replied. The company employs a lot of people. If it shuts down, many families will suffer. Ah, the old lesser evil argument, she said with a sad smile. How many wrongs have been justified that way throughout history? This isn't about philosophy, Richard protested. It's about practicality. Every ethical choice is practical, son. It's our daily decisions that define who we are. Brian was growing impatient. Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't solving our problem. Maybe because you're trying to solve the wrong problem, Mrs. Wilson suggested. How so? Jessica asked, intrigued. You're focused on hiding the problem, not fixing it. Why not think about how to keep the company running honestly? We've tried, Tyler lied. It's not feasible. Did you really try? Mrs. Wilson challenged. Or did you just assume it was impossible? Richard scoffed. Ma'am, you don't understand how the construction business works. I understand more than you think, she replied calmly. My late husband, Samuel, worked in construction for 30 years. He started as a laborer and ended as an engineer. The three men exchanged glances, surprised. And he told me how things worked, Mrs. Wilson continued. The pressures, the temptations, the schemes. But he also told me about companies that managed to thrive by being honest. That was a different time, Tyler argued. Human nature doesn't change, young man. What changes are the choices we make. Rusty suddenly moved, walking over to Mrs. Wilson and then back to Jessica, as if trying to connect the two. He wants you to talk, Brian observed. Rusty has always been good at bringing people together, Mrs. Wilson agreed, especially when they need to help each other. Jessica felt an odd connection with the older woman. There was something about Mrs. Wilson that inspired trust. Do you really think there's an honest way out? She asked. There always is, dear. It might be harder, it might take longer, but there always is. But what about the families who depend on the company? Jessica pressed. They'll benefit even more if the company is honest, because then they won't risk losing everything overnight when the scheme is exposed. Tyler shook his head. You're being too optimistic. And you're being too pessimistic, she shot back. How old are you? I'm 28, Tyler answered. 35, said Brian. 45, Richard murmured. 3 different generations, but all with the same defeatist mindset, Mrs. Wilson noted. That saddens me. It's not defeatism, Richard protested, it's realism. Realism would mean looking for real solutions, not covering up problems. Jessica was starting to feel more confident. Mrs. Wilson is right. There must be a way to run the company without these schemes. Jessica, please, Brian sighed. You don't have enough experience to understand. Maybe that's exactly why she can see solutions you can't, Mrs. Wilson suggested. Sometimes those too deep in the problem can't see the way out. Rusty barked once, as if in agreement. Look, Tyler said, losing patience. This is all very nice, but it doesn't solve our situation. Jessica, are you giving back the documents or not? No, she answered, surprising even herself with the firmness of her reply. Jessica, Brian exclaimed, you don't know what you're doing. Yes, I do. I'm doing what's right. And the employees' families? Richard asked. Don't you care about them? I care deeply. That's exactly why I can't go along with something that could destroy them in the future. Mrs. Wilson smiled approvingly. Good for you, dear. Moral courage is rare these days. Moral courage doesn't pay the bills, Tyler said bitterly. But it lets you sleep peacefully at night, Mrs. Wilson countered. Suddenly, Rusty began barking excitedly, looking toward the alley entrance. Everyone turned and saw a man in his 50s approaching. He was tall, well-dressed, and carried an imposing presence that made everyone tense. Shit, Tyler muttered. That's my father. George Williams entered the alley like a storm. His dark eyes swept the scene and locked onto Jessica. So you're the little secretary causing trouble for my company, he said in a deep, authoritative voice. Jessica felt her blood run cold. There was something threatening about George's presence that made her understand why everyone at the company feared and respected him. Dad, I was handling it, Tyler said nervously. Handling it? George laughed humorlessly. 3 hours to convince one employee to do the right thing. Mr. George, Brian tried to explain, the situation is delicate. The situation is simple. George cut in. "The girl has something that belongs to me and I want it back." Rusty positioned himself even more firmly between Jessica and George, growling low. "And she even brought this mangy mutt," George remarked with disdain. "Watch what you say about my dog," Mrs. Barbara said, her voice icy enough to make George look at her for the first time. "And who are you?" "Someone who's seen plenty of men like you in her lifetime." George studied her for a moment, then turned his attention back to Jessica. "Listen, girl, I'll be clear. You have two choices. Hand over the documents and keep working at my company with a better salary and position. Or refuse, and I guarantee you'll never find work in Denver again." "That's blackmail," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "That's reality," George replied. "I know everyone who matters in this city. One word from me, and you'll be persona non grata." "Mr. George," Mrs. Barbara interjected, "perhaps we should consider other options." "Ma'am, this isn't your concern. Anything involving people being bullied is my concern." George laughed scornfully. "Bullied? I'm offering her a promotion. In exchange for compromising her principles. Principles don't pay rent." "Maybe not," Mrs. Barbara agreed, "but they let you look at yourself in the mirror." "Cheap philosophy," George said. "In the real world, things work differently." "In your world, maybe." Jessica watched the exchange between them, torn. On one hand, she admired Mrs. Barbara's courage. On the other, she knew George had real power to ruin her life. "Jessica," George addressed her again, "do you have family?" "I do," she answered cautiously. "Parents? Siblings?" "Parents." "What kind of work do they do?" Jessica hesitated. She didn't want to give personal details to this man. "My father works at a factory. My mother cleans houses." "I see. Hard-working, honest people." "Honest. They must be proud to have a daughter employed at a respectable company like mine." "They are," she admitted. "And how would they feel if you lost your job over stubbornness?" Jessica felt the weight of the question. Her parents had been overjoyed when she got the job at Williams Construction. It meant stability and a better future. "They'd understand," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Would they?" George pressed. "Even if you couldn't find another job? Even if you had to return to Omaha in shame?" "That won't happen." "Oh, it will, because I'll make sure of it." Mrs. Barbara stepped closer. "Mr. George, you're threatening an innocent young woman. I'm offering a rational choice to an employee. A choice between honesty and survival isn't a real choice. It's the only choice there is in the real world." Rusty began pacing in small circles, clearly agitated by the rising tension. "See?" George continued, turning back to Jessica. "Even the dog knows things are getting complicated." "He knows there are bad people here," Mrs. Barbara said. "Bad people?" George laughed. "Ma'am, I employ nearly 300 people. I support 300 families. I pay taxes, boost the local economy. Who's the bad one here? The one using emotional blackmail to force others into dishonesty. The one naive enough to think the world runs on abstract principles." Jessica felt pressure from all sides. George's logic was hard to refute, even if it was morally wrong. "Mr. George," she finally said, "if the company is so important, why not find a legal way to keep it competitive?" "Because there's no legal way to compete with those who don't follow the rules," he answered. "That's how the game works." "Maybe it's time to change the rules of the game," Mrs. Barbara suggested. "How? Alone? Against an entire system? Someone has to start. And get crushed in the process?" "No, thanks." Tyler, who had stayed quiet during the argument, finally spoke. "Dad, maybe we can find a middle ground." "What middle ground?" Maybe we can phase out the schemes gradually. Make changes slowly." George looked at his son, as if he'd suggested something absurd. "Gradually. Tyler, have you lost your mind? Either we keep our competitive edge, or we lose all the contracts." "But if we tried—" "There's no trying," George snapped. "This is business, not charity." Richard tried to calm things down. "Mr. Williams, what Tyler means is that maybe we can find other ways to stay competitive." "What ways? Cut costs? We've already cut everything possible. Improve quality? Ours is already excellent. Lower prices? We're already working on razor-thin margins." "Maybe innovation," Jessica offered timidly. "Innovation?" George scoffed. "Girl, this isn't Silicon Valley. It's construction in the middle of Nebraska. But even so, but nothing. Do you know anything about construction? About bids? About how the market works? Jessica fell silent, intimidated. That's right, George went on. You don't know a thing, but you want to tell me how to run my business. She's trying to help, Mrs. Barbara defended. She's being naive, and naivety is a luxury I can't afford. Suddenly, Rusty barked loudly and ran toward the alley entrance. Everyone looked and saw 2 cars parked on the street. One had people inside, watching. Who are they? Jessica asked nervously. George looked and paled. City inspectors, he muttered. What do you mean? Tyler asked. Someone must have reported us. They're following me. The situation had suddenly gotten much more complicated. If inspectors were investigating, it meant someone already suspected the company's schemes. This changes everything, Richard said, worried. Why? Jessica asked. Because if they're investigating, they already have some evidence, Brian explained. And if they find out you have documents, they'll want to question Jessica, Tyler finished. George was thinking fast. We have to get out of here, all of us, separately. Where to? Richard asked. Different directions. Jessica, you're coming with me. No, she said firmly. What do you mean, no? I'm not going anywhere with you. Girl, you don't understand. If the inspectors catch you with those documents, you'll be dragged into the investigation. Maybe that's for the best, Mrs. Barbara said. At least she can tell the truth. The truth? George laughed bitterly. The truth is that a secretary stole confidential company documents. I didn't steal anything, Jessica protested. Prove it. Do you have authorization to have those documents? Jessica realized the trap. Technically, she didn't have permission to take those papers home. I just wanted to understand what they meant. For that, you should have asked your superiors, not taken them home. Mrs. Barbara shook her head. Mr. Williams, you're trying to turn the victim into the guilty one. I'm trying to protect my company and my employees. You're trying to protect your schemes. The cars on the street began to move. One parked right at the alley entrance. Damn it, George muttered. They saw us. 2 men in suits stepped out of the car and started walking toward the alley. City inspectors, Tyler identified. I recognize one of them. What do we do? Richard asked nervously. Nothing, Mrs. Barbara said calmly. We haven't done anything wrong. Speak for yourself, George grumbled. The 2 inspectors entered the alley. One of them, a middle-aged man with a mustache, went straight to George. Mr. George Williams? That's me. I'm Frank Smith, a city inspector. We need to talk with you. About what? You know very well what. The other inspector, younger, watched the group carefully. And you are? He asked. Company employees, Brian answered quickly. I see. And you, ma'am? He turned to Mrs. Barbara Wilson, a citizen who was passing by on the street. With a dog? He's my dog. The younger inspector noticed Jessica was visibly nervous. Miss, are you okay? I'm fine, she replied, but her voice trembled. Are you sure? You seem scared. George stepped forward. She's fine, just a little intimidated by your presence. We're not here to intimidate anyone, Frank said. We came to ask a few questions. What kind of questions? George wanted to know. About some irregularities that have come to our attention. Richard swallowed hard. Tyler avoided looking directly at the inspectors. What irregularities? George asked, trying to sound calm. Insider information about city bids. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe not, but someone does. The younger inspector moved closer to Jessica. Miss, do you work at Williams Construction? I do, she answered softly. In what position? Secretary. How long? 5 years. And you've never noticed anything irregular? Jessica felt all eyes on her. George glared at her. Brian looked desperate. Tyler shook his head almost imperceptibly, urging her not to say anything. But Mrs. Barbara looked at her encouragingly, and Rusty stood by her side as if saying he'd support whatever decision she made. She began, but her voice failed. Miss, the inspector pressed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Jessica took a deep breath. It was the moment of truth. She could lie and remain complicit, or she could tell the truth and face the consequences. Can I speak with you privately? She finally asked. Jessica, no, Tyler exclaimed. Of course, Frank replied. Carl, escort the other gentleman to the car. I'll talk with the young lady here. That's not necessary, George protested. She has nothing to say. Let her decide that, Frank said firmly. Carl, the younger inspector, gestured for the others to step away. George hesitated but eventually followed, throwing Jessica one last threatening look. Mrs. Barbara stepped closer. Can I stay? She asked. If the young lady wishes, Frank replied, looking at Jessica. I do, she said. Mrs. Barbara's presence calmed her. Rusty sat beside Jessica, staying alert. Well, Frank began, we received an anonymous tip about possible irregularities at Williams Construction. The caller said there was an employee who uncovered incriminating documents. An anonymous tip? Jessica asked, surprised. That's right. Someone who knows the company's situation well. Jessica thought quickly. Who could have made the report? A disgruntled employee? Or maybe... Miss, are you aware of any irregularities? Jessica looked at Mrs. Barbara, who nodded encouragingly. I am, she answered. Can you tell me? I found documents showing the company receives insider information about city bids. Frank nodded as if he'd expected that answer. Do you still have those documents? I do. Where are they? In my bag. May I see them? Jessica hesitated for a moment, then opened her bag and pulled out a folder with several papers. These are them. Frank quickly examined the documents. This is exactly what we were looking for, he said. Miss, you did a very important thing by reporting this. I didn't report it, Jessica said, confused. I mean, I wasn't the one who called you. No? Then who was? I don't know. Frank furrowed his brow. Strange. The person who called said they were an employee of the company. Well, it could have been someone else. There are other women working there. Possible, he agreed. Either way, these documents are enough evidence to open a formal investigation. What happens now? Jessica asked. We'll investigate thoroughly. If we confirm the irregularities, there will be legal consequences. And the company? Will it shut down? That depends on the extent of the issues. They might have to pay heavy fines and change their procedures. In extreme cases, there could be a temporary closure. Jessica thought of the nearly 300 employees and the people who work there. That's always a concern, Frank admitted, but we can't let companies keep operating illegally just to preserve jobs. I understand, she said, though she still felt torn. Miss, I need you to come with us to give a formal statement. Now? If possible. It's important to document everything officially. Jessica looked at Mrs. Wilson. You can go, dear, the woman said. It's the right thing to do. And after? What happens to me? You'll go on with your life, Frank replied. Whistleblowers are protected by law. But I could lose my job. It's possible, but if it happens as retaliation, that's illegal. Mrs. Wilson touched Jessica's arm. Dear, sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost, but the cost of not doing it is always higher. Jessica nodded slowly. All right, I'll go with you. Good. My colleague will take the others in for questioning too. Will they be arrested? Not necessarily. It depends on each person's level of involvement. Jessica stood, but Rusty stayed still, watching her with an almost human look of concern. Will he be okay with you? She asked Mrs. Wilson. He will, but I think he wants to go with you. He can't. It's a government office. Mrs. Wilson crouched and petted Rusty. Don't worry, my boy. Jessica will be fine. The dog licked her hand but kept his eyes on Jessica. He's really taken to you, Mrs. Wilson observed. I've taken to him too. If it weren't for him, I might have given in to the pressure. Rusty has that gift. He always shows up when people need courage. Frank interrupted the conversation. Miss, we need to go. Just one more minute, Jessica asked. Mrs. Wilson, how can I find you later? I live at 247 Blossom Street, yellow house with a green gate. I'll visit as soon as I can. I'll be waiting. And Rusty too. Jessica petted the dog one last time. Thank you, my friend. You gave me the courage I needed. Rusty wagged his tail and barked once as if saying, You're welcome. Frank led her out of the alley. Outside, the others were already in the official cars. George looked at her with pure hatred. Tyler seemed defeated. Richard was visibly nervous. Brian avoided her gaze. It'll be okay, Frank said, noticing her apprehension. I hope so. They got into the car and drove off. Jessica looked out the back window and saw Mrs. Wilson and Rusty standing at the alley entrance watching them leave. At the station, Jessica spent 3 hours giving her statement. She told them everything she knew about the company's schemes, explained how she found the documents, and detailed the pressure she faced not to report it. Miss Jessica, the officer said at the end, you've done a great service to the community. These schemes undermine the transparency of bidding processes and drive up the cost of public works. Thank you, she replied, still somewhat dazed by everything that had happened. You may go home now, but we might need to call you again to clarify a few points. Of course. And if anyone tries to intimidate or pressure you, come to us immediately. Don't worry. Jessica left the police station as night fell. She took a bus back home but couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. In just a few hours, her entire life had completely changed. When she got home, she called her parents in Omaha. Mom, she said when Margaret answered. Jessica, how are you, sweetheart? Mom, something really serious happened here. What, are you okay? Jessica briefly recounted what had occurred. Her parents were worried but proud of her actions. You did the right thing, sweetheart, her father said when he took the phone. Honesty always comes first. But I might lose my job, Dad. So what? Jobs come and go. Character is the only thing you keep for life. Her father's words reassured her. She knew she had done the right thing, even if the consequences were uncertain. The next morning, Jessica went to work unsure of what to expect. The company was in chaos. Inspectors roamed the halls, examining documents and asking questions. George wasn't present, nor were Tyler or Richard. Brian appeared at her desk around 10. Jessica, I need to talk to you. They went to his office. You really did it, he said, his voice a mix of admiration and disappointment. I did. Why? After everything we talked about? Because it was the right thing to do, Brian sighed. You know this changes everything, right? I know. The company might shut down, or at least have to let a lot of people go. I hope not. I hope they find a way to keep operating honestly. You're so naive, Jessica. Maybe, but I'd rather be naive and honest than clever and dishonest. Brian stared at her for a long moment. You're going to be fired. You know that, right? I figured. George is furious. He says he'll ruin your career. He can try. Jessica, you don't understand the power this man has. And you don't understand the power of the truth. Brian shook his head. I hope you're right. Because if you're not, you'll pay dearly for this. I'm already paying. But at least I sleep peacefully. For now. Jessica spent the rest of the day organizing her things. She knew it was only a matter of time before she was fired. Some colleagues quietly acknowledged her, others avoided her. Opinions were clearly divided. At the end of the day, she got a call from HR. Jessica, can you come here? She already knew what awaited her. Jessica Miller, the HR director Ellen, said formally, "We regret to inform you that you're being terminated for cause." For cause? Jessica asked, surprised. For breaching confidentiality and unauthorized removal of company documents. That's ridiculous. Those are the terms of termination. You can contest it legally if you wish. Jessica knew it was retaliation, but she also knew George had powerful lawyers. Fighting it would be a long and costly battle. All right, she said. When should I turn in my things? Now. A security guard will escort you. It was humiliating, but Jessica held her head high. She gathered her personal belongings under the gaze of her colleagues and left the company where she'd worked for 5 years. Outside, she took a deep breath. It was a forced fresh start, but a fresh start nonetheless. She remembered Barbara and decided to visit her. She took a bus to Blossom Street and easily found the yellow house with the green gate. Barbara welcomed her with a warm smile. "Jessica, come in, sweetheart. I've been expecting you." Rusty ran to greet her, wagging his tail and jumping with joy. "Hi, buddy," she said, petting him. "I missed you." "How did it go?" Mrs. Barbara asked, pouring coffee. Jessica told her everything that had happened since the day before. "They fired me for cause," she concluded. "How cowardly," Mrs. Barbara remarked, "but it was expected. Now I don't know what to do. I'm unemployed, practically broke, and George said he'll make sure I don't get another job." "Sweetheart, you did the right thing. The universe has a way of rewarding that." "I hope so." "It will, you'll see. Actually, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I was the one who made the anonymous tip." Jessica nearly dropped her coffee cup. "You?" "Me. But how did you know?" "Rusty told me." "What do you mean, Mrs.?" Barbara laughed at Jessica's confused expression. "Not literally, dear, but he came home very agitated yesterday morning. He kept barking and tugging at my clothes. When I went out with him, he led me straight near your office." "Really? Really? I watched from a distance and saw you leave looking very nervous, glancing back as if you were being followed. Then I saw the 3 men behind you." "And you followed us?" "We did. Rusty went first, I followed. When we reached the alley, I understood what was happening. Incredible. Then when they started talking about documents and schemes, I knew it was a matter for the authorities. I went to a bakery, asked to use their phone, and made the report. Mrs. Barbara, you saved the day. We saved it. You, me, and Rusty." Jessica looked at the dog with renewed admiration. "He really is special. Very special. My late husband always said Rusty had a 6th sense for people in danger." "Your husband, you said he worked in construction." "He did. Samuel Wilson, he passed 3 years ago." "I'm so sorry." "Thank you, dear. He lived a good, honest life. He was an engineer but started as a laborer." "You mentioned that yesterday too." "Because it's true. And he always told me about the corruption in the industry. It made him furious." Jessica had a sudden idea. "Mrs. Barbara, did your husband ever know George Williams?" "Oh yes. They even worked together at one point." "They worked together?" "Samuel was one of the engineers who helped George build his empire, but they parted ways when my husband discovered the first schemes." "What kind of schemes?" "The same ones you found. Rigged bids, insider information, that sort of thing." "And what happened?" "Samuel tried to convince George to stop. Said it would cause trouble down the line, but George wouldn't listen. Then Samuel left the company. Said he wouldn't be part of dishonesty." "When was this?" "About 15 years ago." Jessica did the math. That was exactly when Tyler said the schemes had started. "Mrs. Barbara, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you have any documents from that time? Anything that proves what your husband knew?" Mrs. Barbara thought for a moment. "I do. Samuel was very organized. Kept everything." "Could you show me?" "I can. But why?" "Because it could be more evidence against George. It would show the schemes were long planned and deliberate." Mrs. Barbara stood up. "Come with me." They went to a room that had clearly been an office. Mrs. Barbara opened a filing cabinet and began searching. "Here," she said, pulling out a folder. "Letters, memos, notes, all from when Samuel worked with George." Jessica examined the documents. There were several handwritten notes from Samuel describing suspicious meetings, conversations about rigged bids, even names of public officials involved. "This is gold," she said. "It proves the schemes have been going on for years. Samuel always said this would cause trouble one day. And it did. Mrs. Wilson, would you be willing to hand over these documents for the investigation?" Of course. That's what Samuel would have wanted. "Then let's go. There's still time to submit them today." They returned to the police station. The detective was stunned by the new documents. "This completely changes the scope of the investigation," he said. "It shows this wasn't an isolated incident, but a systematic pattern of corruption." "What does that mean?" Jessica asked. "It means the consequences will be much more serious for those involved." "And for the company?" "There might be a way for the company to keep operating, but with drastic changes in management." That gave Jessica hope. Maybe the employees wouldn't lose their jobs after all. In the following weeks, the investigation moved quickly. George was taken into custody. Tyler and Richard were charged but cooperated with the investigation in exchange for lighter sentences. Brian was fired but wasn't criminally charged. The company underwent court-ordered intervention. An external administrator was appointed to reorganize operations and implement transparent practices. Jessica, meanwhile, was unemployed but not idle. She used the time to take online courses in management and compliance. Mrs. Wilson helped her financially, insisting it was an investment in the future. "You'll be important in this new phase of the company," Mrs. Wilson said. "How so?" "They'll need someone who understands the problems and is committed to honesty. Who better than you?" Jessica hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. 2 months later, she got an unexpected call. It was from the court-appointed administrator of Williams Construction. "Miss Miller, I'd like to discuss a proposal with you." "What kind of proposal?" "We're restructuring the company and need someone to lead the new compliance and transparency department." Jessica could hardly believe it. "You're offering me a job?" "We're offering you a chance to help rebuild the company the right way. But I'm the one who reported them." "That's exactly why we want you. We need someone with moral courage and first-hand knowledge of the situation." "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but I'd need an answer by the end of the week." Jessica hung up in a daze. She rushed to tell Mrs. Wilson. "I told you the universe would reward you," the older woman said, smiling. "But it's strange, going back to the same company." "It's not the same company. It's a new one, built on honest foundations." "What if I accept?" "You'll be able to make sure the schemes don't happen again, and you'll protect the jobs of many families." Rusty was lying at Mrs. Wilson's feet, watching the conversation. Suddenly he got up and went to Jessica, resting his head on her lap. "I think he's telling you to accept," Mrs. Wilson interpreted. "Really? Rusty has good instincts about these things." Jessica petted the dog. "What do you think, Rusty? Should I take it?" The dog licked her hand and wagged his tail. "I guess that's a yes," she laughed. By the end of the week, Jessica accepted the offer. She returned to Williams Construction as Director of Compliance and Transparency, with a much better salary than before and the mission of ensuring the company operated within the law. Her first initiative was implementing an anonymous whistleblower channel for employees. The second was creating a business ethics training program. The third was setting up regular audits for all processes. Tyler, who had received a suspended sentence in exchange for cooperation, was hired as an external consultant to assist with the transition. He was genuinely remorseful and committed to the changes. "Jessica," he said one day, "thank you." "For what?" "For making me do the right thing. For saving me from turning out like my father. You made your own choices, Tyler." "I did, but you showed me there were other options." Richard was also reinstated as an accountant, though under strict supervision. Brian didn't return, choosing instead to look for work in another city. George Williams was sentenced to 5 years in prison and lost all assets tied to the schemes. The company continued operating, now under new management with transparent practices. A year later, Jessica was in her new office when she received a special visit. It was Mrs. Barbara Wilson, accompanied by Rusty. "How are things?" the older woman asked. "Very well. The company is running with complete transparency. We won 3 bids last month, competing fairly." "And the employees?" "Everyone kept their jobs. In fact, we hired 20 more people." "How wonderful." Rusty was exploring the office, sniffing everything curiously. "He likes to visit the workplaces of the people he's helped," Mrs. Wilson explained, "and he really did help. If it weren't for him, I would have given in to the pressure. Rusty has that gift. He always shows up at the right time." "Mrs. Wilson, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you think Rusty actually understands what's happening? Or is it just instinct?" Mrs. Wilson smiled mysteriously. "Dear, some questions are better left unanswered. What matters is that he helps when help is needed." "That's true. and now he's looking for the next person who needs help. What do you mean? Yesterday he got very restless near a school. I think he found someone. A child? Maybe. Or a teacher. Or a principal. Rusty doesn't choose by age. Jessica laughed. He's a very special dog. The most special I've ever known. At that moment, Rusty ran to the window and began barking softly. Jessica looked down and saw a young woman on the street glancing around nervously. I think he found the next person, Mrs. Wilson said. Shall we go down? Let's. The two went downstairs with Rusty. The woman on the street seemed to be waiting for someone but was clearly uneasy. Is everything all right? Jessica asked. I'm waiting for my boyfriend, the woman replied. But he's late and... Rusty approached her, wagging his tail gently. What a beautiful dog, she said, petting him. He's special, Mrs. Wilson remarked. He has an instinct for helping people. Helping how? Depends on what the person needs. The woman looked at the three of them, Jessica, Mrs. Wilson, and Rusty, and something in her eyes suggested she truly needed help. Actually, she said hesitantly, I really did need to talk to someone. My boyfriend, he's been pressuring me to do things I don't want to do. Jessica and Mrs. Wilson exchanged a glance. This was how it always began. Someone in trouble, needing support to do the right thing. Would you like to talk? Jessica asked. We can go up to my office. You don't even know me. You don't need to know someone to help them, Mrs. Wilson said. That's how the world gets better. One person helping another. The woman looked at Rusty, who sat beside her like a silent guardian. I think he wants me to go with you, she said. Rusty has a good instinct for these things, Jessica confirmed. And so, once again, Rusty had found someone who needed help. Once again, his presence gave someone the courage to do what was right. As they walked back to the office, Jessica thought about how much her life had changed since that day in the alley. She'd learned that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, is always worth it in the end. And she'd learned that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes it comes from a wise woman. Sometimes it comes from a special dog who appears at just the right moment. But it always comes if we have the courage to accept it. The end of the story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have anything to share with us, leave your sincere thoughts in the comments. Do you believe Jessica made the right decision? We'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like this video and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other exciting stories.